So what are you going to do with that pollen now?
Do some X-rated thing and pollinate. There you go. Hello, my name is Oscar. Plane. Oh, there's a plane. There's a plane. There are 35,000 orchid species on Earth, approximately. I have described 12 new species of orchids to science. The thing is that when you do explorations in the field, you don't realize that you are finding a new species. But then you find particular plants or flowers with certain shapes and colors that call your attention, and then you go to the lab and you study them. And it's that moment when it might be, a new species. So when you hear that word, it's like the first time I heard it was like super exciting. When I first fell in love with orchids, it was during my bachelor studies. I met this gentleman who was a countryside man. He didn't have any education, but he was an autodidact. So he learned about orchids, their diversity, how to identify them. He just took me to the field and he taught me everything he knew, and that kind of changed my life. So another way to identify orchids is by the symmetry of the flower. Orchids will have only one plane of symmetry. So if you take a flower of an orchid, you can only mirror it once, you see. Okay, we are very lucky today of a very special orchid that we found in flower. This one is known as Góngora, and they are quite special for one reason. And it's a reason that makes orchids special in general, and it's the way they are pollinated, the way they reproduce themselves. When you think about plants that produce flowers, often the fragrance that they produce is kind of a cue to a pollinator to say, hey, I might have a reward here or not. But in this particular case, it's an exception. In this case, the fragrance is the reward itself. There's a group of bees, tiny bees, that have metallic colors. They are known as euglossine bees. And they are quite special because they have evolved a mechanism to collect fragrances from flowers. They have an image in their head of a compound they have to collect, a mix of compounds. So the male bee will come and look for these compounds in certain flowers and other sources. And so while the male comes and collects the fragrances, he will do pollination by chance. And once the male bee has all the compounds it needs in its head, it will do a blend, kind of a bouquet or perfume, to attract a female for copulation. So here we see another peculiar orchid. These are known as Brassias, Brassia, the genus Brassia. And what is peculiar about this orchid is the fact that when you look at the flower, it does look like a spider from afar. And actually, once a famous orchidologist hypothesized the means by this orchid is pollinated is by a wasp, which actually attacks the flower, thinking that it's trying to parasitize a spider. But in fact, while the wasp attacks the flower, it's doing pollination, it's taking pollen from one flower into another. So it's this little structure here that I'm removing. And those yellow grains you see there, those masses, what we call pollinia, is the pollen that the wasp would take into one flower and put it into another here in this little hole. I'm doing right now pollination. It's important to understand and protect plants and fungi because our life depends on them. I think it's also important to protect all life on Earth because beyond the benefit that they could bring to human society, every fungi, every plant, every orchid, every animal has the right to exist. I think the work we do here in Kew Gardens is fundamental because here our research produces baseline knowledge on plants and fungi, the diversity, where they occur, where to find them, how rare they are, how they have evolved. And all of this knowledge is essential to understand how life will be preserved in the future, you see. I am Oscar, and I am one of the 350 scientists working in Kew to understand and protect biodiversity.